Did you know that a simple guided breath and a precise intention can halt the loop of overthinking in under 60 seconds? And that this technique traces its logic back to documented trance readings archived for decades? Based on more than 14,000 authenticated trance readings preserved in the Cayce Archives and analyzed by independent researchers, what I will teach you in the next minutes is a condensed, practical method that turns nocturnal soul practice into an immediate tool for mental clarity. In the time it takes to sit quietly, breathe, and set a single phrase, you will learn the three inner states your consciousness moves through when it quiets. Hear three documented cases in which this approach stopped crippling rumination, and receive a step-by-step routine you can use tonight. Have you ever lain awake with a single worry replaying, the mind chewing the same detail until your body and life are exhausted? Imagine being able to interrupt that loop so fast that the turmoil never takes hold. I will show you sensory signs that tell you whether an inner message is genuine, explain how the silver cord imagery relates to a safe return from a mental drift, and guide you through a 90-second nightly practice that builds a lasting habit. Stay with me. At the end, you will have a protection practice to use before sleep and a testing plan you can try within a week. The story of this method begins with a researcher named Jonathan Ames, who in the late 1980s served as a volunteer stenographer for trance readings and then devoted his life to translating the practical instructions he found in the transcripts into everyday routines. Jonathan worked with a small institute that later merged with the Cayce Archives, and he cataloged hundreds of entries where subjects reported abrupt cessation of obsessive thought following a focused breathing pattern and a short spoken intention. The turning point came when a reading described what the trance speaker called the inner still point, the precise second when the flow of worrying stops and the soul can access a higher directive. That single phrase in a reading moved Jonathan to test a 60-second protocol in clinical volunteers and in everyday people. Independent physician Dr. Helen Moore recorded reduced anxiety scores in a pilot group, and a stenographer named Paul Reed supplied verbatim transcripts that established reproducibility. This is not anecdote alone. The archive files include corroborating notes from physicians, witnesses, and follow-up letters that show measurable declines in repetitive thought. Jonathan Ames is the protagonist of this method, and his backstory explains why he became devoted to something so deceptively simple. He grew up in a small river town where the sound of water and the scent of wet pine shaped his early imagination. As a child, he learned to calm himself by watching the current and counting his breaths, a habit he later recognized in older readings. He studied literature and then trained as a volunteer stenographer, listening for patterns among trance sessions. In his 30s, he lost his younger sister to illness, a grief that turned inward as relentless mental rehearsal of what if and if only. That personal suffering gave him a fierce motivation to find tools that actually stopped rumination. He read the archived trance transcripts obsessively, noting the consistent language used when subjects reported sudden relief. A short command to the self, a visual of a silver cord taut and alive, and a warm light enfolding the heart. In his 40s, he combined those clues with breathing science and simple intention setting to craft a protocol anyone could use. He trained under Dr. Samuel Park to collect physiological data and under Miriam Thompson to translate the ritual into accessible instructions. Today, he teaches the method in clinics, prayer rooms, and online with strict attention to safety and measurable outcomes. One of the first documented cases that proves application comes from Marcus Hale, a Midwest entrepreneur who describes a boardroom moment that had become a nightly replay in his head until a single dreamlike instruction stopped it. The dimension we call the borderland is the twilight zone between waking rumination and soul clarity, where images feel hyper-real and time stretches. When Marcus was exhausted from a failed acquisition, he began waking at 3 in the morning to the same loop. He volunteered for a session recorded by stenographer Paul Reed and guided by Jonathan. Marcus later told Dr. Helen Moore, and the notes read, "I felt the room cool, heard a faint chime, smelled ozone, felt the cottoniness of the light, tasted nothing but a clean metallic clarity."
In the session, he spoke aloud his intention with a breath, and the recording captures his voice. I ask for one clear instruction to end this loop. Jonathan prompted, "What do you see?" Marcus answered, "A narrow silver cord tethering me," then a hand pointing to a ledger and the words, "Delegate and release." The team applied the instruction practically, and within days, Marcus reported that the replay lost its emotional charge. The sensory details of the borderland in the transcript are precise enough to be convincing, and Marcus went from sleepless nights to regained focus in 1 week. If these first stories moved you, pause and type a brief response in the comments. Start your reply with, "My dream started with," and then a line or two about the most repetitive thought that wakes you, or the most vivid dream fragment you remember. I read many comments and often feature one to explore in future videos. Sharing helps build a community that identifies patterns and testable signs. Even if you have never remembered a dream clearly, write that too. These exchanges help others see how widespread repetitive mental loops are and how small interventions can change them. Now, returning to the material, the next dimension we will explore is the library of the records that some call the Akashic field, a place
where concise cognitive cues appear as symbolic instructions. The second case, centered on the Akashic-like experience of Rosa Alvarez, a mother who dreamed a recipe that stopped her mind from spinning with worry about her child's chronic migraines, shows access to precise information and healing directives. The Akashic image is of a library of light where each shelf contains condensed instructions in tone and texture rather than pages. Rosa described the smell of old paper and lemon incense, the sound of soft pages turning, the tactile cool of a brass knob, and the taste of warm cinnamon as she reached for a small vellum card that read the phrase she later used aloud to interrupt her loop. In clinical follow-up, Dr. Samuel Park documented decreased panic episodes and fewer medication refills. The ritual was simple and repeatable: a breath, a spoken command, and a visualization of white light closing around the thought. The transcript names witnesses, including stenograph Paul Reed and nurse Louise Ortega, who monitored vitals and noted heart rate drops concurrent with the instruction. The third dimension is the high creative or divine contact, where prophetic images occasionally appear and where the method scales to existential insights. A case recorded in 1973 by researcher Eleanor Briggs tells of a teacher who, in trance, received a vivid future outline that she later used to make a career change. The description is sublime: a vast room of color like honey and glass, a low chorus that vibrates in the chest, the smell of rain on hot rock, and a taste of copper that precedes a clear sentence like an oracle. The prophetic case is not the core of the method, but it demonstrates that once the mind is freed from obsessive feedback loops, larger intuitive messages can be heard. The implication for you is practical. Stopping the loop clears cognitive bandwidth for decisive action or for a deeper guidance that matches your life direction. Before I teach the protocol, a brief protective instruction is required. Protection is standard practice in the archive readings and must be used prior to any mental exploration. Take a breath and visualize a sphere of white light that touches your skin. Feel its warmth like sunlight on your hands. Hear the soft hum of safe distance. Smell clean linen, taste nothing intrusive, and imagine the light anchored by a silver cord to your heart. Speak silently or aloud, "I am protected by light, and I will return to my body now." If you have religious language that comforts you, use it. If you have anxiety or a history of dissociation, consult a clinician before attempting deeper trance work. These steps reduce the chance of confusing wandering thoughts with authentic guidance and create a reliable container for practice. Now, the method in plain, usable steps and a guided dialogue example to show how the exchange unfolds in a live session. The practice takes under 60 seconds and can be repeated whenever a loop begins. Step 1. Breathe in quietly for 5 seconds and exhale for 5 seconds, focusing on the sensation of air entering and leaving the nostrils. Step 2. State a single clear intention in simple language, such as, "Stop this thought now," or "Give me only the next small action."
Step 3. Visualize the mental image of a silver cord pulling the thought away and anchoring it outside your immediate self. Step 4. Speak a closing protection phrase and open your eyes. Below is a short recorded exchange from a clinic session expanded to illustrate dialogue texture and timing. "Take a breath and tell me the phrase you will use," the guide asked. "I will say, 'Stop and breathe,'" the client answered. "Say it now aloud and hold the breath after exhaling for 3 counts." "Stop and breathe," the client said, and held a soft exhale. "What happened inside when you said it?" "The worry loosened like a knot untying," the client said. "Describe any image that came." "I felt a silver cord like cool string around the thought, pulling it away," the client said. "Where did the cord lead?" the guide asked. "To a small box on a shelf, and the box had a sticky note that said 'Delegate,'" the client said. "How does your body feel now?" the guide asked. "Calmer, chest lighter, a small warmth in my palms," the client said. "When you are ready, nod and open your eyes," the guide said. "I am nodding," the client said, and opened eyes. "Name one immediate action you can take," the guide asked. "Send one email delegating the task," the client said. That exchange contained 10 clear turns and shows how the method intersects sensory language, verbal intention, and a concrete next step. Sensory cues used across the dialogue included the coolness of the cord, the sound of the breath, the smell of linen imagined during protection, the tactile looseness in the chest, and the visual sticky note as directive. 2 moments of tension appear often and require explicit handling. The first moment happens when the loop resists and memory surfaces as guilt. The inner voice becomes louder and you feel trapped in a loop of reproach. Memories of failure, like a film strip, trigger a surge in heart rate and a sensation of pressure behind the eyes. In that pressure, there is a decision point. Crumble under the accusation or speak a single sentence that reframes the memory as lesson. In clinical notes, researchers recorded the exact words clients used when the loop broke. "I did what I could then, I will act differently now." Saying that out loud, combined with the breath, shortened the loop. The second tension arises when an intense image appears that feels like it contains too much meaning and the practitioner fears losing ground. A childhood scene may flood the senses with smell, taste, and heat, provoking panic. The protection routine calms the body and the practitioner holds ground. Guide invites the person to name the sensory detail aloud while maintaining the white light. Naming anchors the mind to the present and prevents runaway dissociation. These tension responses are 1 part behavioral, 1 part ritual, and 1 can rehearse them safely. The documented case of physical health impact shows the somatic power of stopping rumination. Martha Lyle had a chronic back condition exacerbated by nighttime mental churn that increased muscle tension and pain. She learned the 60-second protocol and reported sensory details: the smell of peppermint in the air during protection, the sound of a bell, the taste of metallic clarity. Over 3 months with daily practice and medical oversight, Dr. Samuel Park documented reduced pain medication use, improved range of motion, and lower inflammatory markers in blood tests. The team of witnesses included Miriam Thompson, who tracked subjective sleep quality, Nurse Louise Ortega, who verified medication changes, and physician Andrew Cole, who attested to the medical results. The narrative shows how a mental habit can exacerbate physical conditions and how quick interruption can initiate a cascade of bodily relaxation and healing. The karmic dimension and work with past life imagery appears in a subset of recordings and shows how the method helps close loops across time. Several subjects reported scenes of repetitive behavior rooted in old relational patterns and used the 60-second interruption to reframe the script. One woman named Elena found herself repeating a pattern of withdrawal in relationships, and in a guided session, she visualized an ancestor by name, felt the damp earth smell of a farmhouse, and heard a melody that unlocked a memory. Naming the pattern aloud and speaking a restitution sentence allowed her to enact a closure ritual simple enough to repeat nightly. She then reported fewer automatic withdrawals in subsequent months. The process is not forensic proof of past lives, but it is a useful psychological and spiritual frame to locate recurring scripts and to offer them closure. The method, therefore, becomes a practical tool for karmic adjustment and for resolving cycles that otherwise replay across decades. Now, a concrete testing plan you can use. Tonight, before bed, spend 5 minutes on the protective visualization I described. Repeat the 60-second method at the first sign of a looping thought. Keep a small notebook by your bed and write a single-line summary of the thought, the phrase you used, and the immediate action you took. In 1 month, review the notes and measure changes in frequency and intensity. Expect in weeks to notice clearer mornings, and in 3 months to shift the default from rumination to problem solving. Share results in the comments starting with My Practice Report to help others calibrate their timing and phrases. To close, remember what you saw here. Documented archive material, practical cases where the method stopped crippling loops, and a simple protocol you can apply tonight. Start with 5 minutes of protection and then the 60-second interruption phrase. Test once a day for a week and observe the pattern. In 1 month, you will likely notice clearer mornings and fewer intrusive repeats. In 3 months, the habit becomes intuitive, and in 6 months, you may find space for creative insight or decisive action you once deferred. If these stories resonated, write in the comments the single phrase you plan to try and begin your reply with "My test phrase is," so others can learn from the variety of wording. If you want more documented cases and step-by-step guides, subscribe and join a community that values evidence and spiritual practical tools. Sleep with intention and interrupt the loop. Wake with the clarity you need to move.